we've just heard. What I'd like to start by doing is thinking about what it takes to design a robot. And I'm going to talk about one of the projects that's ongoing here in ITEE that we've been working on, designing what we call a friendly robot. But before we do, I want to start with some of the really fundamental questions that underpin social robotics, which is what this is and computation itself. So I'm a computer scientist by training. I was always interested in what is computation, but not just silicon computation, not just what happens within a machine. So I did a PhD in computer science, and then I did a postdoc in psychology. Because 100 years ago when I was a postdoc, the human brain was the most powerful memory system that we had. It's still a pretty good memory system. It's not so good for accounting and things like that, but it's still a very robust semantic system. And I got interested in bio-inspired computation. So computation in the brain, in biology, but you need to come down to what is computation. So I want you to think for a moment, if you're going to give a definition of computation that's not just covering silicon machines, what would it be? What does it mean to compute? What's a computing element? Processing data. Sorry, rules? Okay, could you find that in biology anywhere?
Whether you're talking about actually your brain.
I was thinking about the brain as a biological computer. Yeah. Okay, so at the synapse level, you could say there might be a rule operating at that level. Anywhere else? Yeah? Okay, so I don't know if everyone heard that, but at the central nervous system, you've got inputs, sensory processing, outputs. Is input-output processing what is fundamental to computation? So it's a fundamental component, but actually, when you dig into it, there's another definition. And it's much, much more abstract. Doesn't invoke rules, doesn't talk about inputs, doesn't talk about outputs. If you have any process, it could be a source of energy, you've got something leaching across a gradient, any kind of movement, change, and you can bias that outcome in a reliable way. You can use that as a computing element. So think about a wire. If you can have different voltages, you will get something happening along that wire. Now, if you can interfere, you can either prevent or augment what's happening, change it in some way. Any sort of bias will do. Think about a waterfall. You have water streaming down. If you can change where that water goes, make it faster, make it slower. So when you start thinking about the brain, yes, you can think about what's happening as two neurons connect together, but there are a lot of other gradients that are happening in the brain. So you can actually think at the level of a molecule. So I don't know if you know how much you know about molecules, but complex protein molecules, they fold up, they have these conformations. The conformations have energy levels. They're not stable. They keep moving. Statistically, they're moving. If you can get another protein molecule that comes in, biases that to stay in one state, or maybe to oscillate faster, you can build a computing element out of molecules. There are transport systems through a cell. If you can bias what happens along that transport, you can build a cytoplasmic computer. If you can look at the membrane, and there are all sorts of proteins through the membrane, you can build membrane computers. So in biology, if you start thinking about this generic notion of computing, you actually find computers everywhere. So when you start thinking about what is memory, which was my question when I was a postdoc, you start finding it everywhere. You find it in the genes, in the gene transcription, in the proteins, in the cytoplasm. You find it in the cell walls. You find it in the way organisms grow. Okay, so it's interesting thinking what is computation. Fast forward a couple of decades later, I'm kind of interested in a whole lot of different computational processes. Evolution itself has computational processes. These interact. Obviously, biology is an outcome of those processes. But I'm interested in what makes brains still very interesting computational devices. So in what ways would you say brains, if you think of human brains in this case, are more powerful than our best silicon computers even today? What kinds of things can brains do that silicon computers can't do? Empathy and feeling? Halting problem. Now that's an interesting one. Can human brains do halting problem?
You can tell whether it's code some stuff that's really what you can't figure it out.
Yeah, so the claim here is that you can tell whether a piece of code is going to stop computing. Now you can tell in certain instances. The halting problem is the generic case. Can you solve the generic case? There's a lot of claims there, particularly among people who've never programmed, that the human brain can solve the halting problem. Personally, I have my doubts. Okay, so we have empathy. Any other things that you think human brains might be better at?
Filtering out irrelevant information.
Filtering irrelevant information, yes. More calculations per second, yeah.
Pattern recognition.
Pattern recognition. So, that's an interesting one, because certainly the human brain is very good at some forms of pattern recognition. But has anybody been following what Jan LeCun and Hinton and Facebook and Google have been doing with deep neural networks? The kinds of things they're doing now just blow you away. So, pattern recognition, I'd be willing to say human brain in some places, deep neural nets maybe in others, yeah.
Abstract thought and imagination.
Abstract thought and imagination, yes.
The trick one is forgetting names.
Yeah, forgetting names. Dealing with ambiguity, and actually, forgetting is one of the things that a human memory, any memory system, should be designed to do. And it's kind of like 99.9% of all the sensory information that flows past you, you must forget if you want to be able to filter and focus on the important stuff. So, it's a nice example. Another example? Unexpected events. Okay, so is there a killer app here for what a human brain is good for?
Adaptability.
So adaptability is still a generic function. I want a specific thing that people would pay money for.
Human brain is a computer optimized to keep you alive.
So if you want something that helps keep you alive, well, that does keep you alive. Yeah, replacing a biosilicon one probably wouldn't work too well. Although they're starting to develop silicon chips that can replace the hippocampus. I haven't seen the results. I have my doubts whether they really understand the multiple levels and function of the hippocampus. But if you didn't have a hippocampus at all, I'd be better than nothing. Okay, all right. One killer app that if you work in social robotics, the human brain is paramount good at is driving a physical body in close proximity with other soft and fragile human beings. We don't have social robots that operate in human spaces that have powerful properties yet. Unless you think vacuuming is a powerful property, which some of us who hate vacuuming think it is. But it still doesn't do the washing up, it still won't hold a child, all sorts of other things. So what I'm interested in is this notion of computation, but computation that is embedded in the world, in hardware, and drives it in interesting ways. So this comes to the project that I want to talk about. So, some of you, a few of you here, my students, have seen the work that my group has done looking at a small robot. This is a rat-sized robot called the iRat, work from David Ball and Scott Heath. And we were developing a robot that can interact with a rat. So this is rat meets iRat in basically the rat's environment without damaging the rat, and because rats are very good at managing their wires without damaging the robot. It's also, our little robot has also been used for things like robots evolving languages with other robots, so how do robots evolve with their own work. I've talked about that to some of the new kids before, so I was going to move on and say, not just rat-sized robots, but suppose we start working with human-sized robots. And I'm going to start with small human-sized robots. So this project is called the Wiles project, for want of a better name. And the idea was to build a robot that would interact with children, particularly 2 to 6-year-olds, fairly young children. It's a collaboration between my group, which is in complex and intelligent systems, robotics, interaction design, and psychology. Okay, so it's inspired by a project at University of California, San Diego, called Ruby. Ruby has been running for 10 years, 6 different versions, and the idea of Ruby is to build a robot that can survive in a preschool, which is a pretty good test of embodied intelligence, without harming the children, and interacting with them. So Ruby 1 was basically a giant Teletubby. The kids adored Ruby 1. But Ruby 1 doesn't have a lot of functionality. It's basically got a screen that they could interact with. This one shows Ruby 3. Ruby 3 had grippers, and they could play give and take very, very slowly. Some of the videos show the robots. The child gives the object, this fluffy toy, to the robot. The robot grips it, has a look at it, and as it's taking it back to the child grabs it and they're off playing. So, yes, interaction, but very slow. Ruby 5 was designed to have much more interesting arms, a head that moves. Ruby 5 survived for a month, pretty much unattended, and it's the first of the type of robot that we're beginning to call ethnodroids, ethnography robots that collect a lot of data about the interactions around them. One of the things that Ruby 5 did is, because Ruby 5 was hanging out with kids for so long, worked out all the social interactions between the children and developed social maps of the social networks among the kids. Who preferred to play with whom, who was shy. And this information is kind of important if you happen to be wanting to work with kids, particularly kids at risk, to understand what's going on in a group. So the Ruby 6 has very complex arms. Ruby 6 is a great product, except that it's a little bit... John's laughing because he was working there a couple of months ago. Ruby 6 has dexterous arms, but breaks so often. The more complexity you have in your hardware, the more likely that you can get failures when you actually put it in practice. So Ruby 5 is really the one that we're building from. We wanted to build a robot here. Ruby 5 is actually quite complicated. We decided that there's no open source specs for it. They're willing to share all their code, but it's code written by grad students and undergrads over 10 years. We thought maybe coding from scratch we might understand more about what's going on. So we decided to develop some use cases for what we wanted it for. So a robot, we're going to continue on the Lingo Droids work instead of robots evolving languages with robots. We'd like a human to be able to evolve languages with a robot. Put a robot in an early cognitive development learning centre to be able to study how children interact with technology. And so this is Kristen Hensby's PhD work. So she's interested in the difference between a child learning with a human adult, a child learning from a tablet, which is particularly important given the way technologies are moving into our education system, and then the child learning with a robot helping. And then the final one was Jason Weigel is an interaction design PhD student. He's working with augmented reality, and we thought, if you had an augmented reality system to mediate between the robot and the children or the people, what could you do? And the sky's the limit for some of the designs here. So these are our three. I'm going to talk about the middle one. And we brought together a team of people. We started on the first day of the winter break. So on the 1st of July, we pulled together a team and decided that we would build a simple prototype as rapidly as possible. We thought it'd take us about a year to get a full robot into the Psych Centre. But some of the interaction designers said, look, let's just start with cardboard, see what we can mock up as quickly as possible. So Pete Worthy was leading this, working with Michael. Is Michael here? Michael's one of our winter students who came on as a scholar during semester as well. Jason programmed eyes and tablet games using Unity very rapidly. And then our winter students were also putting together hands. So you see on the right there, those funny looking gloves. The gloves are covering touch sensors. So one of the things we're really interested in interaction in the real world, is what we call a social moment. Now when you look at how the brain processes information, the cognitive information is often 1 to 2 seconds. When you're aware of something, you can process it, you can reflect on it, think about it. You're often dealing with a time scale of 1,000 milliseconds or more. If you're looking at a single neuron spiking, you're looking at 1 to 2 milliseconds. If you're looking at the difference in hearing so that you can tell the sound of a room, you're looking at 10 microseconds. So we've got different time scales that the brain can compute, but we're particularly interested in about 100 spikes, so about 100 milliseconds. This is the time frame at which we actually interact with other people. So you can look at someone, share a glance with them, and know they're sharing a glance with you in 100 milliseconds or so. You can't actually move your eyes in that time, but you can send signals with your eyes. And actually that's faster than one side of your brain can talk to the other side of your brain. It's really intriguing, the multiple scales of timing that the brain has learnt to cope with. So we wanted to be able to deal with really fast interactions. And one of the ways we thought was, rather than trying to do visual processing, which at the moment is going to be way slower, particularly if you are using anything on the web or any sort of complex computation. So we thought we'd try it with touch sensors. We thought we'd put touch sensors in the hands, and when a child touches the hand, the eyes would turn that way. Very, very simple social interaction. So that's what these gloves are all about, was trying to do this. Actually, the other project, which is not here, but is running parallel, and I think some of you might have heard Josh Arnold's talk yesterday, is we've been working with the dynamic vision sensor, which is an ultrafast camera, and certainly the people we work with the IRAT would like us to put it into the IRAT, and down the track we might be building DVSs into our robots as well. Okay, so rapid iterative prototyping. We went through a series of different prototypes. These are nicknamed. Version 1 was Olaf, a bit like a snowman. The Space Cadet was the first one that was actually tested with children. Now, if you know anything about how long it takes in engineering to prototype things, from day one, when our team met together, to the day when the Space Cadet first met a child with no engineers in the room, was 23 days. 23 days. When I talk about rapid iterative prototyping, it had already been through several versions by then, but the idea was to do it very rapidly. And that speed, apart from exhausting everyone in the team, is exhilarating, it's exciting. It means that you're constantly making decisions, just-in-time decisions of what's possible in the moment. And I've been thinking a lot about the process. We're just writing up, now we're 12 weeks into the project, about what it means from an evolutionary perspective, and a lot of the decisions evolution makes, we have to make in this project, which I'll be telling the team about later. Anyway, so the Space Cadet met the child. She was intrigued, excited. She watched the eyes moving. Interestingly, we never got to test the touch sensors. Do you know why? She wouldn't touch the hands. Yeah. I mean, they look pretty creepy. But there was a very good functional reason why we designed them like that, and maybe the kid would have been didn't know. It would have been okay, but turns out. So if you look at version 3, Eva, she's got different hands. Eva's interesting. The hands on Eva, Pete covered them with it's contact, but it's a really interesting soft contact. And when you touch it, it's kind of like your hand just wants to stroke it. And it turns out that's what the kids do. So Eva's hands, although they look pretty weird, they're not at all anthropomorphic, ended up being very popular with the kids. All right. So, what do children think? We knew what they think of the Space Cadet, but we tested with a couple of kids. We had an opportunity, which came up the week after the first trial event, Space Cadet, of actually testing at the Young ICT event, which was here at UQ. So there are going to be more than 50 younger siblings of the primary and teenage kids attending the event who are going to be bored, looking for something to do. So what we thought we'd do is set up a Ruby bed. And we set up three different events. So we were testing an augmented reality sandpit, so we set that up for the kids to play with, just a generic place for them to play, and Ruby, and the kids could interact with Ruby. So if you have a look at this, it shows you some of the things that were happening over time. In the background there's Ruby Oz with a couple of kids. There's a map there. We discovered that the map actually helps the kids know how close they can get to Ruby. Facilitator's sitting there, she's interacting between them and the robot. Now, one of the interesting things in social robotics is how much should the robot do from the word go, and how long does that take? If we were going to have a social robot that actually had all the capabilities we want for it to interact with the children, it wouldn't have taken 23 days. So we decided to use Wizard of Oz, which is a typical technique that's used in social robotics. So instead of having the robot with all its own behaviours, you have a wizard, and here Jason, the one standing, is the wizard. We have people processing data because what we decided to do was video the event, so we had 7 hours of video, which meant there was a lot of data to be collected. We had big signs up saying we're recording, we've done all the ethics ahead of time. I can't believe ethics can take a long time. One of my honours projects, the ethics came through 18 months after its application, which wasn't a lot of use. Kristen managed to get, she already had ethics for all of her work with technology and kids, she managed to get the ethics through the psych department in under a week, which was pretty fantastic. Okay, so here you see at the front here one of our first year interns. Autumn is talking to a parent and they're doing ethics and a survey of the children's behaviours. Tamara's playing with one of the kids. So there's a lot of different things happening here. Okay. And then we collected a whole stack of data. In particular, we're interested in how the children interact. Now, we've gone to the trouble of creating the touch sensors. The children love holding the hands. You can see on the left, the little boy here is just under 2 years old. He came running up, stumbling over the mat, plonked himself down and grabbed the hands. He was really excited to be there, and his eyes were on the face. Now, eyes on the face is really interesting because this is something that people do when they're learning. It's something they do when they're trying to gauge a reaction of those around them to a situation. Is it a good situation, a bad situation? Is it exciting? How should I be reacting? What are you thinking? You look at the face. And so we're particularly interested in when kids look at the face, which kids look at the face, how often they do. There's a lot of data here. We're still processing that. We haven't coded that. We did code touch, though. On the right, you see some older boys playing with one of the games. The little boy, well, I shouldn't say little, he's a big boy for our group. On the left, basically didn't look much at the face at all. The one on the right was constantly monitoring, and actually he loved the robot, whereas the one on the left, the game was probably too boring for him. He was too old for this group. Okay, so the other sorts of things you want to do in a psych study, that it was intriguing to us, was that you usually want to know what the kids think about things. Now, what Kristen has typically done, our facilitator, is she usually asks a questionnaire. The questionnaire is her asking the kid a lot of questions, what we decided is we would get robot to ask the questions. So our robot ethnographer is not only recording what's happening, but also taking part in the social interaction and being able to ask questions that otherwise our researchers would have to do. This question was, does Ruby have eyes? And you can see the way the children will, do you have eyes? And they'll point to their eyes. Does Ruby have eyes? And in this particular case, you can see what's happening. So we're doing stickers. Do you have a sticker? And they'd be pointing. They all have red stickers if we can use them in our studies, because the kids are allowed to interact with the robot. If the parents say no to the ethics, we don't use them in our further analysis. So all the parents who said yes, they've all got red stickers. Do you have a red sticker? They didn't show it to Kristen, they showed it to Ruby. And they would be holding up to the eyes that they wanted Ruby to acknowledge. Now, we've got a lot of programming to do to make that acknowledgement happen. We learned a lot about what the children will want from the robot from this example. The other sorts of things that typically we do in a lab when you're trying to get to know kids really fast, because typically in the psych lab what they're doing is running cognitive tests on the children. They need to make the children familiar, comfortable with the experimenters or facilitators. So in this particular case, the little boy here asked for a high five. Now, Ruby's got pull noodle arms. That was a decision. The pull noodles, you can pull them off. You can run wires through the middle of them. They bend. The kids hug them. You can do all sorts of things with them. But of course, they don't get to move. The idea is eventually we do want them to move. But in this particular case, it's this arm. Christian just did this. And then the kids would high five, and Ruby, or the facilitator, depending on how this worked, would say, good work. Okay. And what we'd like to do is build a robot that can do an effective high five with a kid. Okay, you can easily put a hand here. Is that going to work for a high five? Well, it depends on where the kids' hands are, what they're doing, how high it is, but also how many high fives will it take before that arm starts to break. But I should mention that was one of the things that happened to Ruby 5. At the end of the month, one of the arms had been ripped off. Ruby 5 is still functioning, which actually is very good. So we are cognizant of the fact that the robot may well end up with bits ripped off and it still has to be a functioning robot. Okay, where are we going next? There's a lot of work to do on the hardware. This was a prototype. One of the things we want to do, obviously, is put in arms. We wanted the robot to be able to do a gentle hug, which means putting shoulders to some degree. We wanted to be able to high five. We wanted to be able to offer, so that it can do Lingodroid's give and take games, rather than trying to do grippers. From our research to date, grippers are still either $75,000 or aerodrome. So we wanted something far simpler than that, and since our hands have been really popular with the kids, we started trying to work out how we do games where you can do a give like this, and you can do a take like this, and just drop it, which is one of the things that kids would do. Software, there's a lot of work to do on the software, everything from age-appropriate games to the integration of the system, how fast can we get the system working. We want the robot to be able to respond in 100 milliseconds, but we also want it to have complex recognition abilities. Human brain does this. It does it in an interesting way. From your vision system, there is a direct route to the amygdala, which can detect the expression of someone they're looking at without knowing who that person is, whether they're old or young, whether they're male or female, whether they know them or not. So, and that's very, very fast. And then there's a slow route that goes through the cortex, and then comes down to the amygdala and provides all of this information. So the way we're currently thinking about our architecture is that we need to have very fast responses, but we need a multi-level integration system so it can do the slow, rigorous processing as well. Okay? We need to develop experimental protocols. There's a lot of apps and games. We haven't yet gone into the augmented reality in a big way, but this is just a video of the setup Jason has. Here, Jenny Green, who's a linguist who works in the desert in Northern Territory with Indigenous populations who do sand drawings. She had given a talk to our language centre here, and we took her in to see the sandbed and the ways in which we might use the augmented reality for recording and replaying some of the Indigenous sand drawings, which are part of the way in which they use language. So there's some really interesting things in augmented reality, from applications that have nothing to do with Ruby through to ways in which it might project a toy or a picture onto a hand. They might be able to play give-and-take games. And ultimately, one of the things we love to do is have child and robot agree on a name for a toy that's been projected in augmented reality, and then the child go into another room and find the real toy and bring it back, having never seen it before. So there's some intriguing things we can try here. The other sorts of things we've been doing is Josh Riddell, who was here a little while ago, has been building a 3D model of the arm movement, and this robot here in the bottom left actually has two different types of arms. Josh had built a simulator. So he's a first-year software engineering student, and one of the lecturers said, hey, look, this guy might be useful for your project. We invited him to come and show us what he did. He's been coming to our meetings ever since. In simulation, you can actually see the way the arms move, and that was very cool, because we couldn't work out if a robot has a hand that's at a certain level and there's an offering and a hug, where does that fit in terms of the body? Where's the child in all of this? So on the simulator, that was one thing, and then Josh printed it out and gave us a whole new level of awareness of the way in which the shoulders move, the arms move, and by playing with the real value, the real system, we came up with a completely different idea. So eventually we wanted not just a flat robot, but we wanted a 3D one. So you see the 3D prototype here. This was our fourth one that was actually tested with children. We did have some interesting behaviours from the children for this robot. Would anyone like to predict what would happen? How many people here have heard of Uncanny Valley? So what happened? Kristen came to the meeting with the video and she said, you have to see this. Okay, we changed about 15 things, so it wasn't just one thing, but here's a picture of what the robot looked like. It's just a 3D robot. We moved the tablet out to the side. It was a bit more bulky. Okay, the head had changed from the EVA type of head to something that was a bit more stable. We had a case earlier where 4 of the children had pushed the tablet through the back of the robot, so we wanted it to be a bit more robust. So various things, it had the nice hands and everything. Kid comes into the room, took one look at the robot, and goes and hides behind his mum. And then he hides a bit more behind her, and then he gets under the chair. And at this point, the mother said, look, he adores robots, it's not a problem, he loves robots. Kristen decided that was it, end of session. She couldn't coax him to come out. So she put Ruby to sleep, Ruby's eyes go to sleep, tell him that Ruby's asleep, he peeks out, and then he scoots out the door. Okay, so we don't know if it's just a Brighton robot or if this is actually a case of the Valley. So for those of you who haven't heard of it, the Uncanny Valley is a very strange thing in robotics, first described by a Japanese researcher who was building prosthetic hands for people who lost their hands. Turns out, if you make it more and more realistic, people like it better and better. Until you get to a certain point where it's almost perfectly realistic, but not quite. And there's a huge plunge, and you get this creepiness feeling that just freaks you out. For some of the things I've seen, I do what the kid did and rush out of the room as well. It just makes you not want to be there. So he was doing it with hands, and their solution was to get a wood carver to carve a beautiful wooden hand. So it may be that what we've hit is the Valley, or it might be just a scary robot, or it might be just that one kid. 2 other children, one of them, the kids normally run up, they sit in the cushion in front, Kristen's sitting there, One of them stayed about 3 meters back and said, I'm going to sit here. And another one would leave his mother. So that one's been since modified. The other sort of thing we're doing is data analysis. So prototyping is ongoing. We're rethinking 3D data analysis. We decided to code the touches on the robot because one of the things we really want to know is if we have touch sensors, where should they be? Now, I mentioned that there are touch sensors in the hands and the kids like these hands. Can you predict what I'm about to tell you next? We have never had a child trigger the sensors in the hands, even with the hands that they like. So, great touch sensors, but they're obviously not in the places where the children touch. And we don't necessarily know the social meaning of touch for the children. So one of the things we decided to do is take all our video, take our kids from the YRCT event, code the touches, and what you see in the last corner is data analysis. This is from Scott, sent me this yesterday. We're writing this up for a paper that will be submitted on Tuesday, and it's basically showing different kinds of touch. The little girl in pink at the left is touching the hands, touching the tablet, and she's weaving her hand through the black curtain, which she did in a really interesting way, making us rethink the whole notion of touch. And then we're trying to come up with visualizations, and there is a whole science of visualizations for those of you who are doing either science or computer science, for trying to show the interaction between the children with each other and the robot. Okay, questions? So I started by asking, what is computation? One of the things that's coming out of the social robotics work that I think is really intriguing is what is communication? And it's probably worthwhile me stopping here because I think we're over time. But I'll leave these questions with you to think about. What makes the social robot interactive? One of the great surprises of this project is how simple the robot can be. Like basically a flat piece of cardboard with a couple of tablets, and the children really enjoy interacting with it. And what is communication in these cases? How do we program it? How do we understand it? And what do we need to do to build a robot that is robust, effective, and something we haven't done yet? We haven't yet cracked the 100 millisecond, which is the motivation for the whole project, but that's still to come. I think I'll stop there. Someone monitoring this? Do we have time for questions?
We are running a bit over time. So.
Okay, so I'm happy to take questions at the end of the session if you want to talk to me then. Okay, thank you.